So it's gone from lines in the camp to changes in the camp. It looks as if Anthony Yarde is set to bring on James Cook into the team. Uh, I have to come clean initially. I'm not too familiar of when it comes to James Cook. I'm aware of who he is, but I think he's a little bit before my time. So for those who don't know, he's a former British and European super middleweight champion, and I think for the past few years he's done a lot of youth work, using boxing to engage youth and take them away from crime, which is very admirable. But yeah, so I just want to give my take on how I feel like this pairing is gonna go. As far as I know, he's been brought in as an addition, so I'm not necessarily sure he's going to be replacing Tunde, which personally I think it has the potential to go well, depending on Tunde's attitude. Because I think a lot of us, we know what Tunde Ajayi is like, and if people are able to put egos aside, then it can prove to be a productive relationship. Because I'm in the camp, pardon the pun, of people who actually gives Tunde some credit and believes he deserves some credit. Don't get me wrong, he's a very abrasive character. My coach actually spoke on him once back when I was boxing a few years ago, and he didn't have many complimentary things to say about him. But nevertheless, I think it's important to realise that Anthony Yarde, yes, he is a natural talent and very athletically gifted, and clearly has a natural inclination for learning things quickly. You can see that in his technique and the way he moves. And, he hasn't been up against the steepest competition for the vast majority of his career. He does have a confidence about him. And I don't think you can't teach, you can only teach so much of that. I think a large part of that is just his natural psychological makeup, as well as his physical makeup as well. But I think when it comes to Tunde, he understands how to help a boxer learn. Because when you watch him and Anthony on the pads, it's similar, not the same, but similar to when the Mayweathers, when Floyd Jr. would be on the pads of Floyd Sr. or Roger Mayweather. And people would say, oh, that's nothing special. It's just a routine. It's just a routine. They've practiced so many times. It's just a routine. And they kind of poo-poo that kind of pad style. And that always, struck me, because the thing is, yeah, it's routine. Yeah, it's rehearsed and it's, replayed over and over and over again. And that's the whole point. It's a drill. It's boxing is a sport. I understand it's fighting, but it's a sport at the end of the day. And you get good technique at your sport from drilling your technique. And I think that's something that Tunde has learned, and he's latched onto it, and he's managed to apply it very well to Anthony Yarde's development. My issue, well, I have a couple of issues, but I think firstly, pertaining to the boxing technique side, they've got the drilling down pat, which is great. I am just worried that Anthony Yarde's arsenal is lacking slightly. Don't get me wrong, he came close to winning that Sergey Kovalev fight, and he deserves a lot of credit for it, because he was really stacked up against it. I think in retrospect, a lot of people would agree that Sergey Kovalev is one of the best light heavyweights of the past few decades. And he's a formidable opponent, even though he is in the twilight of his career. But Anthony Yarde, with his lack of experience, was able to almost seize that win. And I feel like the technique is lacking a little bit. I feel like Anthony Yarde is held back a little bit, maybe because there is a bit too much of an influence from the Money Mayweather technique. You see a lot of young prospects in the UK, but especially in the States, where they'll copy a lot of the techniques that Mayweather would use. And when I say Mayweather, I'm talking about Mayweather towards the end of his career, when he was not at his most effective, I'd argue. And they copy the technique, and they do it the right way in terms of the way it looks, the aesthetics of it, but they don't have the true understanding of when to apply it, in which situation. And then they start to come unstuck. And I feel like Anthony Yarde's arsenal in his theory needs to be upgraded a little bit. And I'm not necessarily sure Tunde Ajayi can do that, purely because since the Kovalev fight, I know Yarde has only had, I think, 3 fights since then. I think it was the pie that he fought in Spain after that fight, Dex Spellman, and then Lyndon Arthur in the fight, which he lost, of course. I didn't see any improvements in those fights. And after losing the most important fight of your career, I'd at least hope to see some improvements, some changes, some adjustments. And you could argue, oh, maybe those opponents just didn't bring those adjustments out of him. But then you could also say, well, he lost to Lyndon Arthur, who, yeah, is a different opponent to Sergey Kovalev, but it was a competitive fight where you'd hope to see those adjustments come out. And so, as I say, I feel like with Tunde, maybe he's just gone a bit stale. So bringing someone in like a James Cook, who, as I say, I'm not necessarily too clued up on what he knows and his capabilities as a fighter or a coach, but maybe it's a good idea, it's at least to get some exposure to a new trainer. So I think only good things can come from this. But also, I feel like I'm assuming that they aren't as familiar with each other as, say, Anthony and Tunde are. And I think that's good, because we did start to see a large aspect of cheerleading in the Anthony Yarde setup, be it with Tunde, be it with other people in his entourage. And don't get me wrong, to a degree, it's a good thing to have, because you see Anthony Yarde, he's a very happy-go-lucky, water off a duck's back kind of guy, and that's partly what allowed him to perform so well in the Sergey Kovalev fight, because he was out in Russia, he lost his luggage, he was probably getting taunted and people asking him what he's going to do after he loses, all that kind of stuff, and he just takes it in his stride. And that comes partly from having a good team around you. But I'm just wondering whether in these clutch moments, in these close competitive fights, like a Lyndon Arthur fight, where maybe the stakes aren't as high as a Kovalev fight, and he still needs that extra edge, but because it's not for a world title, that's when the team comes in, and that's where the team tells him he has to, bite down and buckle up and turn it up a notch. And maybe him and Tunde have just become a bit one-paced and a bit stale. So, yeah, just some meandering thoughts on this, this introduction into Yarde's team. At the end of the day, it's an interesting development, and it just adds more intrigue to Yarde's next fight. He was actually scheduled to fight this weekend against Amin Atra. Exactly. Who's that guy? But it's been cancelled because I think Yarde is suffering from an abscess or an ulcer in his mouth. So the fight's been cancelled. Hopefully, another fight is rescheduled with a better opponent. But at the end of the day, if he's bringing on a new trainer, maybe we can't be too harsh on him if he's trying to learn new things. Maybe tweak some techniques. So yeah, let me know what you guys feel and think in the comments. If you liked this video, give me a thumbs up. If you disliked it, give me a thumbs down. It's all good. And subscribe if you like the channel. Let's get this ball rolling. So yeah, thanks guys.